Hey, my name is Eva Chin. I am the chef and founder of the Soyla Club. So today what we're making is what we call a meat cake or a meatloaf. We also call it patties. For me, it was very special because my father is not a man who can cook. He'll set the place on fire. There was this one year I was very sick and no one else was in the family except for me and my dad. And I told my dad I was really hungry. I needed some food. And he genuinely looked stumped. I'll never forget that. And I became genuinely worried what he was gonna make for me. And out of the 5 dishes he made, 4 dishes failed. But when he lifted the steamer basket and the aroma of the steamed meat patty transpired through the house, I was immediately awakened and I felt like this is, oh my God, I need to eat this right away. This is very, very special to this dish, and this is ginger juice. It's not minced ginger, not done by a knife. This is specifically with a ginger grater. It macerates and it really tenderizes the meat. So right here I have a 2-to-1 Canadian chicken to Canadian pork ratio. The Canadian chicken is so important in this dish, and what I really enjoy making of this is the leanness and the clean structure of the ground Canadian chicken is what's gonna bring together the protein and how it emulsifies with all the fats. One of the first times I ran into what a meat patty was is actually a meatloaf. A Western meatloaf that was wrapped in bacon and baked with ketchup and apple juice. And it wasn't pleasant. When I came to learn about Chinese meatloaf, I was like, oh. And one of the biggest distinctions was there was a pool of golden broth that seeped out of the meat patty that filled the edges and just the surface. We never put broth in the dish, and I would watch him intently through every step, and I'm like, I swear, I've never seen this broth go in. How does it come out with a plate full of broth? And you know, I later found out that through his slapping technique of emulsifying the meat and all the vegetables and the textures we cut, basically we are forming and trapping all the juices of the meat patty inside those air bubbles. And that's why this dish was so good with rice. Textures is very important in this dish. As you'll notice, I have some corn, I have mushrooms, ginger juice, you know. I have water chestnuts, which is what really creates a nice, crunchy, juicy texture in this dish. And one thing that was very important when we made this recipe was tea. When me and my father would make this recipe, I was always in charge of filling the teapot. And then my dad would pour the tea into little cups and he'd pass it to me and he's like, this recipe is really easy. It's just a little bit of chopping and you put it into the steamer. The biggest challenge about this recipe was patience. We're waiting for this meat to marinate. So I'm gonna sit here, I'm gonna stand here, and I'm gonna have a cup of tea. I'm gonna pour in one for my father as well, because I hope he's gonna make sure this recipe is gonna go on very smooth. Throughout the years, he taught me what patience meant through this recipe, through waiting for the tea to brew, drinking it while waiting for meat to marinate. It was intertwined along with life lessons that he would teach me in the kitchen. Now, I used to ask my father, how do you know when the meat's marinated? Like, when do you know it's supposed to be 10 or 15 minutes? And what he does, he puts it on the board, he takes his cleaver, and what he does is the act of getting all the meat bubbles out. Scrape it up. I'm gonna slap it again, scrape it up, slap it again. He said, when the meat sticks to the cleaver and leaves streaks behind, then it's ready. This is the key to this recipe, according to my father, my forefathers, and that is the beauty and the emulsification of this meat. If you look at it, there's no air bubbles left in it, it's just nice ribbons and streaks. That's really what you're looking for. Just saying that my grandfather used to say to my dad, and then my dad passed it on to me, 功夫在细干. Kung fu comes from time. Craft and skill comes from time. My family's legacy recipe is all about time. He made sure I remembered that craft and skill was something that wasn't just chosen and acted upon, it was built upon. And so one of the greatest life lessons he taught me is if I genuinely care about something that's a craft and a skill, I'm gonna work on it.
I'm gonna practice.
It still smells the same as it smelled when I ate it the first time when I was really sick. So that's a good sign. I think my dad would be pretty proud of this. Now this is why we use my dad's emulsification process. As he's beating out all the air bubbles, he's tightening all the holes filled with the juice and the fat. And when you steam it, it releases this skirt of broth, which is really good for eating with rice.
I will only eat this dish if there is rice available. It's just very, very nourishing, but also the broth is just something I can't just sip on its own. I really like it with rice. Thanks for joining me in discovering such an inspiring story that my father left behind for me. And I hope it inspires you to also look and dig deep into the stories that your family has left behind for you.
This is my family's legacy recipe, and I'm gonna go cook some rice now.